Every year, new brand trend reports promise the same thing. Adopt these trends and your brand will grow. But heading into 2026, the danger isn't missing out on trends, it's misinterpreting them, because not all trends are equal. Some trends shape how brands grow, while others just impact what is happening on the surface. So in this video, I'll break down the structural brand trends that are actually making a difference to help grow your brand in 2026, the adjacent trends that will impact brand performance, and the visual and cultural trends to be aware of, but not blindly chase. Knowing the difference is what separates strong brands from noisy ones. Trend number 1, from fragmented brands to unified brands. You'll find more and more brands in 2026 becoming more fragmented, more out of alignment, chasing multiple channels with different tools, different technologies that will cause this confusion, this inconsistency. So the most important thing, and the thing that's most necessary with all of that, whatever tools you're using, whatever technology you're using, and whatever direction you want to take your brand in, what channels you want to market on, how you want to talk to your audience, there has to be alignment. Without it, you're going to spend more on marketing, you're going to take more time making decisions as a business, you're going to be more confused internally as well as with your audience. So alignment is crucial in 2026, because most brands don't fail because they lack creativity or innovation. They fail because everything is pulling in different directions. They're completely fragmented, or as what we say at Elements Brand Management, they're in an identity crisis. And because of that, they struggle to communicate what they do. They get the audience wrong. They're completely fragmented on different channels, and it just becomes a mess. And that actually makes it harder for your audience to remember your brand, because the more confused they are, or the more out of alignment that you are, the messages that you're sending are just mixed messages, different visuals, different communication pieces. You never give your audience the chance to stop, settle, and get clear and understand who you actually are. When your brand is unified, the opposite happens. You are able to communicate your brand to the right people in the right way consistently. And the consistent part is important, because that's what builds upon habituation. And that's what starts to build brand fans, build your demand pipeline, and actually starts you to nurture people through that pipeline to point of sale. And in 2026, this fragmentation is going to become a growth blocker for many brands. They'll have their marketing in one channel or one place, they'll have their design in another place. And this communication mismatch is what causes this sort of fragmentation. They'll be working from campaign to campaign rather than having an understanding of what the brand is ahead of time in order to understand what they're going to be marketing and how they market and how they show up. All these things will cause this fragmentation or an identity crisis that will lead brands to just spend more, find it harder to reach their audience, and actually just slow down the growth potential that they actually have. The brands that end up scaling will have a strategic spine where positioning, strategy, personality, storytelling, design, marketing, sales, culture, all of it is unified. And it's in that unification that the growth becomes easier, faster, and more reliable. Strategic trend number 2, internal alignment becomes a visible brand signal. So here's a trend that most people aren't actually talking about and could be a big needle mover in 2026. Audiences are increasingly judging brands on how they behave, not just how they communicate. And where these brands fall down a lot of the time is that they focus on the external communication part, they forget the internal part of their brand, building a culture, building rituals, habits, values, beliefs inside the company, cultural touch points that end up building the front-facing part of your business, so where your staff interact with your customers on the front line day to day. And when that isn't working, when that's out of alignment internally, not only do you get a confused internal team, confused brand, confused audience, but you actually get other things that compound upon that, such as customer experience feeling inconsistent, or in some cases, just not nice at all. So a really bad customer experience or brand experience can hinder the brand in many ways, especially with the amplification that people have now with social media and the ability to put stuff out there to lots and lots of people. Different teams interpreting the brand differently. Now, this might be because of the issue we talked about in trend number 1, which is about becoming more unified from fragmented. So if you've got a fragmented brand, sometimes what you have is internal teams will kind of just run their own show. They'll do things in their own way. So sales and marketing won't be on the same page or talking to each other. You might have operations, or you might have accounts or finance, and they're all in different positions. They all think of the brand differently, and it causes this confusion internally. And that just isn't good to have in any shape or form, because it will leak out to your customers, who will also feel this confusion, this inconsistency. So that's something that really needs to be put to bed and kind of get handled. And one of the ones that we see a lot is that marketing is promising more than it can deliver. So they market more, they talk up a great game from a communication standpoint, but the delivery method and the delivery model, and even sometimes just the ability to deliver, is just not there. And that mismatch between the talking about it, the communications, the marketing, and then the actual experience, if there isn't a consistency there, that really needs to be handled, because that's something that can kill sort of repeat business. It can kill that ability to have an advocate or a loyal brand following, because you end up having a one transaction and done approach, and it's just not good for building a business long term. So in 2026, brand strategy stops just being a document, and it shouldn't have been anyway, but it will be more so this year. It'll actually become a living, breathing operating system inside of your business that embeds and actually helps to direct your team, your culture, and your experience, so that everything is on a shared page from a shared perspective of the brand. Trend number 3, from aesthetic perfection to intentional design. For the last few years, brands have chased polish, so ultra minimalism, over curation, and design that looks great but says little. This is starting to shift. So in 2026, visual identity will move more towards intentional design than just for the visual decoration side of things. From our perspective at Elements Brand Management, this is something that should have been happening anyway, but what we've seen is a shift from this ultra simple minimalism. Now it'll be a bit more intentional, and it's starting to move back to intentionality with design. And it will mean that design will start to signal meaning and not just visual trends, reinforce positioning, not distract from it, and help people understand the brand faster. And as I've said, this should have been happening anyway. It's something that we've been doing for many, many years now. But at the same time, there was a shift to this kind of minimalistic approach, which was brought on by the cycles of design trends that you get. So from overly designed to minimal, back to then something that has a bit more design flourish to it. These kind of cycles, these trends that you see in things such as pop culture, music, literature, the films and the kind of trends of films that we have, they all kind of follow cycles. And design should have always been intentional, and where minimalism is called for, it should be used and utilized. So don't remove minimalism if it feels right for your brand. But I think brands are going to move more now in 2026 to understanding this intentional design and the impact it can have on communication if done right. And I think some of this shift will be brought on by technology. The question that will be being asked more next year around this is, instead of does this look good, it is, does this help people understand us better? So does this design communicate what we want it to? Does it speak to our audience? Is it going to resonate with them? So these kind of things will be more intentional, but they'll be more intentional across the board, not just with branding agencies, but with everybody that is utilizing design. There will be more of an intentionality to it and more of a rising of the tide when it comes to design across the board. Trend number 4, memorability over beauty alone. Alongside the previous shift will be more of a focus on reclaiming the idea of memorability. Again, there was a shift away from brand and the kind of impact that it can have from a memorability standpoint. Not completely, but there was a slight shift away from it with different trends and things that happened previously. But there'll be a shift back now to the idea of how can we make our brands more memorable? What things can we do to utilize all of the psychological triggers that people have in order to help with memorability? And that is because for many years, there was a sort of interchangeable nature to a lot of brands, that trends would happen, things would pop up and people blindly follow trends. And therefore what happens is you have a lot of brands that look or feel similar. In 2026, we're going to see a lot of brands trying to break out of that mold and actually tapping back into the idea of differentiation, not for differentiation's sake, but actually in an authentic way. So embracing the imperfections of their brand, not trying to be absolutely perfect, but at the same time being unique, being different, and therefore memorability for those brands will spike. But on the other side of that, it's not just about standing out, because awareness on its own is a short-term spike. So you can create awareness with something shocking, but that, if it's done wrong, can harm the brand long term. Some people don't realize this. They think that being different or standing out is just shock factor. So how extreme can we get away from everything else in the market? And you don't actually have to be extreme. You just have to be different enough. And different enough means that you don't want to move too far away from what you're talking about, because you can actually break people's patterns with regards to what they're looking at, what they're seeing, what they're taking in, and all these things can cause issues. So in the past, I've seen personally a lot of brands who have gone too far in order to try and overly disrupt. Now, it works for some brands, but it only works if it's authentic. Liquid Death, for example, it makes complete sense with who they are as a brand and what they're trying to achieve. Trying to replicate that in certain markets or certain industries just wouldn't work, because it doesn't make sense. So you want to be different and you want to be memorable, but you don't want to dial it up to 11 with a Spinal Tap reference unnecessarily. So in some cases it works and it needs to, but in other cases, just being that little bit different is enough. So you don't want to go too far. So what does this mean on a day-to-day basis? It means owning distinctive visual assets. Now that sounds simple from a brand identity perspective. Hasn't that always been the case? It has. But now that's going to go even further. And especially with the explosion of technology, you start having to be very careful with the visual assets that you create, the styles that you use, the tone that you work with. All these things can be different and fragment, like we talked about earlier on. So you want to have those distinguishable visual assets that you can identify as your brand, that you can own. And those want to be codified probably more succinctly than ever before, because there is such a vast array of different technologies that can be used. It can quickly spiral into confusion. There'll also be more of a consistent approach in 2026, which will actually increase scalability and growth. So you'll see more brands starting to be more consistent. And again, this is to do with the idea of technology, losing a through line by using too many different tools, maybe not having it set up so that they're on the same page, utilizing different prompts in different spaces. All these things create confusion for the brand. So consistency is going to be paramount. So you're going to need things like centralized strategies, guidelines, which we've had for years, but they're going to be more robust and they're going to need to be sort of almost have more governance about them from a brand perspective. And the other thing to think about is not to try and reinvent the brand every quarter. It can be really easy, especially if you have marketing departments with revolving door directors or managers, to, when someone comes in, the first thing they want to do is leave their mark, and therefore they change everything. They have to do something different to what there was before, which is almost like the cycles of trends. When you think about it, it's a similar kind of thing. But this causes confusion, and it can confuse not just the internal team, but the audience as well, really consistently. So having something set out from the beginning of the year, or at least an idea of what you're going to do that year in terms of promotion. There'll be things that pop up from time to time that are sort of snap campaigns that you sort of dive into. There always are. But as long as they're on brand, that's fine. Those things happen. But having an overarching idea of what you want to do that year, rather than trying to just come up with it on the fly every quarter, is going to be so important this year in order to get the consistency right and get that repetition, and also the memorability, the distinctiveness. All these things come in if you have a plan in place. Trend number 5, from attention seeking to demand generation. So attention still matters, as we spoke about earlier, with regards to attention spikes, and you still want that, but you actually want that demand generation to be built behind it. So you want to capture people's attention, but you want to create demand more than ever. In 2026, there's going to be a lot of noise. There's going to be a lot of companies, there's going to be a lot of things coming out with technology and automations and things like this. People can scale, they can deliver things faster, they can create things that just send out things faster than ever before. So we have this dearth of stuff coming at us every single day, whether it's in emails, whether it's through SMS, WhatsApp, social media, whatever it is, it's going to be coming at us. And so step 1, create attention. You need to. It's still important, it always has been. But what you need to do on the back of that, similar to what we talked about with the experience side, is you need to then create demand. You need to have some substance to your brand that means that people want to keep seeing the things you're sending, that want to sign up for things, that want to download things, that want to engage with things, that want to fill out forms, go to webinars, go to downloadable PDFs or lead magnets, interactive apps, diagnostic tools, whatever it is that you're using. However you want to engage your audience. All these things should be about building demand and helping that person become an advocate for your brand long term. And so the only way to do that is you need to capture that spike of attention, but you need to convert, you need to take them through a journey in some way, and you need to make sure that they become part of that pipeline that eventually builds demand. So there's going to be more of a shift to this in 2026. As there is more noise, there's more things being thrown at people, I think people are going to get a bit more overloaded, and therefore attention is going to be important. But demand and capturing people to actually build on demand and nurture them is going to be so much more important this year. And the brands that will grow in 2026 will use attention strategically and not performatively. As I spoke about earlier on, there won't be extreme for extreme's sake. It will be strategic attention they are trying to capture because they want to turn those people into demand by putting them into some kind of pipeline, some kind of funnel, building a community, whatever it is. The attention has to lead to something, and it can't just be shocking for the sake of attention's sake. That means using content to build belief in your brand and not just for reach. So vanity metrics and reach, they're important. They're important to get out there and to reach people and to get new followers and these sort of things. But they don't mean anything if those people have followed you for a piece of content that really isn't anything aligned with what you're doing. So getting clear on your content, speaking to the right people with the right message at the right time, these things are going to be really important because then it's more strategic with what you're doing. You're building that following that you want, and it might be a smaller amount of numbers, but a smaller amount of dedicated followers that have the potential to be a brand advocate, a repeat customer, somebody that shares or refers you to somebody else is going to be 10 times, 100 times more important than having thousands and thousands of followers that look great but don't actually convert ever. It's also about creating familiarity with your audience before activation. And with the amount of stuff that's going to be coming at us this year, if you can capture somebody, I want to say capture, I mean bring them into your brand ecosystem, they become part of your world, and you create familiarity with them through consistency, as we've talked about, through a unified brand, as we talked about, rather than fragmented, through a great brand experience in whatever guise that is. Even before they convert, the experience is great. Whatever they interact with has a great experience. It's also going to be about every time you gain attention, you want to try and reinforce your positioning. Now, we talked about that with design, but you can do it in a number of different ways. But if you can consistently remind your audience of your positioning so that when they are ready for you, you are the brand that is top of mind, then you've won. And this is what the shift will be in 2026, is brands trying to earn their place in the market more by being more consistent in how they talk about their positioning, what they stand for, what they stand against, what is the battleground that they are fighting on, what are the arguments and the sacrifices they make as a business in order to differentiate from the competition. All these things will be really important messages that people will be talking about to help people sort of clear through the noise to hear your brand and choose it over somebody else. Now we're going to look at some adjacent trends to what I would call brand trends. So these are adjacent trends that will impact business, impact the world of business next year even more than it already has. And these things are things that are really worth looking at and thinking about as we get into 2026 and beyond. So the first one to think about is obviously AI. So AI is everywhere. It's in everything. It's going to be in everything. It's going to be embedded into more and more stuff, to the point where at the moment AI is a bit of a buzzword. It's used by everyone, people are talking about it, but eventually it's just going to be something that is part of what we do. So similarly to the internet, it will become something similar. So it will have those things embedded in it. So when we think now of like the Internet of Things or those kind of things, smart fridges and stuff, that at one point you wouldn't expect it. You'd have to talk about it all the time. But what's going to happen is it's going to be adopted into everything. So everything you wouldn't even expect to have AI in it, it's going to have it in it. It's already started. So in 2026, you're going to see more content creation, more design, more messaging, more copy being developed by AI. And that is a great tool to use and to utilize to build your brand, especially at scale. But if we just remember some of the things we talked about earlier on in this video, just be mindful of consistency, fragmentation of your brand, being able to stand out. If you're utilizing something that a lot of people are using, do you sound the same as somebody else? Do you look the same as somebody else because you're utilizing a similar platform to generate some of the visuals that you might use? All of these things are important questions to ask as a company. There'll be more questions around intellectual property and how it is utilized and what is being pulled from where and how it's being generated. all these things will come up. But at the end of the day, it's a fantastic tool to utilize for your business. So utilize it, but maintaining that consistency, that tone, that visual identity, those visual assets and your personality are going to be what helps you win in 2026. So don't erode that by utilizing too many different tools if you can help it. Another trend is going to be hyper-personalization. So in marketing, in any sort of apps that you utilize, all these sort of things will have hyper-personalization, and it's something to think about with your brand going forward. How can you be more personal? And actually adding that human touch is a trend that I didn't talk about earlier on, but it's kind of in the idea of imperfection. But being more human as a brand is going to be so much more important with all of the tools and automations and chatbots and AI that's kind of out there now. The human side of the brand is going to be so much more important. So being human, being personable, having a personality is going to be really, really important. But having hyper-personalization, if you can make your audience feel like they're the only one, you're speaking directly to them, there's choices that have been made because of who they are, even if you're utilizing AI to help with that. So if you look at things like Amazon's been doing it for years, but personalization with you might like this, even that, you know it's automated, you know it's part of an algorithm, you know it's all these things, but it still makes you feel special because it's for you. So anything like that where you can personalize any part of your interface, your app, your experience is only going to benefit you in 2026. The other thing to think about, not necessarily a trend, but something to think about is platform instability and algorithm fatigue. So some of these things are starting to happen now. They have been for a while, but they're going to get even more prevalent in 2026, which will see the platforms themselves, social platforms, etc., reacting to these things in order to keep their platforms relevant. But in the meantime, you might see some changes and some flux between the reach that you had and the reach that you're going to get. And all these things are important to consider, and why it's more important than ever from a brand perspective to focus on reaching people that you want to speak to, rather than just going for reach or just going for followers. Like trying to speak to the people that you want to speak to, nurturing your audience, carving out your niche in a particular area or platform, having your unique voice, your kind of thought leadership, your experience, whether you're a large multinational company or you're a smaller business, having your unique perspective, your differentiation statements, your story, whatever it is, the things you want to tell that make you you is going to be really, really important, because with algorithm fluctuations and platform instability, you don't know who you're going to reach on a day-to-day basis. If your message is consistent, and it will get through to the right people if you're true to who you are and you celebrate that uniqueness. So there will be some changes with regards to those platforms over 2026. There's already been some changes pre-Christmas with regards to LinkedIn, for example, and the algorithm there. But if you understand who you are, if you show up as yourself, if you talk from a unique perspective, if you have something to say, if you're serving a particular audience, you will cut through that noise. And it's important to remember that, important to think about that. And actually having that handled, that clarity of your brand, is a really important step in order to develop content it's actually going to resonate. Okay, so finally we're going to talk about design trends, visual trends in 2026. I always talk about these last because they're important and they're going to shape what you see from a perspective, but they don't actually move the needle like some of the trends we spoke about earlier in this video and some of the adjacent trends or almost market shifts that are happening for businesses. So these are kind of the icing on the cake in terms of like your design and communication. But if they don't work for you, don't blindly follow trends because everyone's doing it, because then you get sucked into a sea of sameness. But if they work for you, then by all means, utilize them, take them on board. If you've got somebody in your team or if you're utilizing an agency that's great with design, they'll be able to advise on using these in the best way possible that makes sense with your brand, helps you to communicate your unique position and communicates to your audience in a way that resonates with them. So without further ado, some of the visual trends to look out for in 2026 are a return to bolder typography and utilizing different fonts in different contexts. So starting to utilize fonts in a way that tells a bit more of a story, gives a bit more personality, adds a bit more of a human touch to it, isn't all just overly polished and looking corporate or simplistic. There will be some variations on this. And it's going to be great because it's going to add that expressive nature back into certain things. It's going to give that human side. It's going to give a real tangible feel and actually add some personality where it's been sorely missing for a long time. So that would be great for that to come back in. So look out for that bolder typography usage, mixing fonts in a way that adds personality to a design. We're also going to see some more expressive, less rigid layout systems, and that's going to be interesting as well. It's almost going to break out of a mold. It's going to be a bit different. Again, it's about attention grabbing, but it's doing it in the right way. It's trying to be a bit more intentional with design, looking at being a bit more human, maybe a bit more abstract, a bit more out there in terms of what you'd expect. And all of these things are only going to help with your brand standing out and actually becoming the thing that people notice. People are so used to now, like almost like snow blindness, but on platforms, on the websites, wherever they're looking, they can just quickly just turn off from something. So having something that breaks perception, breaks the experience, breaks what people normally see, is only going to help your brand stand out. So more expressive layouts, more interesting layouts, different things, utilizing grid systems, but also with some outliers might be quite an interesting visual trend you might start to see. Another thing you'll start to see is an increased use of motion, human design, and imperfections. So making things feel a bit more natural and organic as opposed to very locked down. So having these kind of more natural sort of movements, utilizing a bit more, instead of having a linear kind of movement, you'll have a bit more of a soft in, faster speed up and a soft out. I mean, you've been seeing it for years anyway, but it will come more in 2026 with more of a human design approach. So it'll be a bit more about leaning into the idea of human visuals, natural kind of experiences. Those kind of things will shine in 2026 and something to think about. And how can you weave those things into your design, whether it's UI, whether it's actual physical experience, whether it's the design of a particular campaign, whatever it is, weaving in imperfections. It doesn't have to be too much as well. Again, it's not going to the extreme, but weaving in a bit of humanity, a bit of imperfections, and stuff that just feels organic will actually really resonate in 2026. And brands that are also designed to be a bit more organic as well. So visual identities that can shift slightly, that can move, that can evolve, that can sort of almost have the flexibility to grow into different spaces will be something you'll see more of. And that'll be interesting with regards to guidelines and governance and brand management, because you still need to have some kind of through line and a consistency. But having brands that are able to have movement in them and evolve a bit more than they have done previously gives that, again, that feeling of natural, organic, something real, as opposed to simple, static, corporate, which we'll be moving away from purely as well because of the technological influence. People will want to interact with things that feel more human, organic, even if it isn't. So those things are good things to think about when designing in 2026. So the big trend of 2026, the real thing that you want to be focusing on isn't tactical, it isn't technological, it is clarity above everything else. So everything we've talked about all is underpinned by the importance of clarity when it comes to your brand, because the brands that are going to grow in 2026 will be unified internally, they'll be unified externally, they'll be visually consistent and intentional with their design, and will generate demand through that consistency and by earning trust. In a world where anything can be automated, brands that can actually come forward and be more human, utilize imperfections, utilize design to communicate, build great experiences, and generate demand for their brand are going to be the ones that win, because trends will come and go, but clarity builds a unified brand, and that compounds over time. So now you know about the trends of 2026. If you want to know where your brand currently stands, where it's weak, where you could improve, how clear you are as a brand, we actually have a 4-minute brand power assessment or scorecard. And what it does, it takes you through 20 questions, takes 4 minutes, and it will score you across 5 key areas of your brand and give you some insight in how you can improve those areas based on your score. So if you're interested in that, there is a link in the description below. If you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, hit the like button and hype as well. If you have any hypes left for the week, please subscribe using the button below the video and hit the bell notification. You'll be notified every time a new video drops. Videos come out weekly and they're designed to help you unlock your brand's full potential so you can stand out from the competition and create more impact. Have a great week, catch up soon, and keep those brands unified.